Within many ecclesiastical communities, there is a pervasive assumption about the domestic sphere. The prevailing belief is that active religious participation and Christian faith naturally insulate families from the systemic violence observed in the broader secular world. The epidemiological landscape of gender-based violence across the Asian continent and its diaspora tells a different story. Intimate partner violence is highly prevalent, and Christian families are not exempt from these patterns. This chart visualizes data from the Indian National Family Health Survey, a rigorous sociological baseline sampling hundreds of thousands of households. Across India, the national average for married women reporting intimate partner abuse is 26.21%. When we isolate the demographic data for Christian women, the statistical prevalence structurally mirrors that secular national average. Nearly 1/4 of all Christian women in India, 24.71%, have been subjected to intimate partner violence. That umbrella statistic encompasses severe coercion, including 21.31% reporting physical abuse and nearly 11% reporting emotional manipulation and isolation. These numbers track directly toward lethal endpoints. Recent UN tracking shows that Asia accounts for over 17,000 domestic fatalities in a single year, making it the continent with the second highest absolute number of gender-related killings globally. The crisis within this specific demographic is sustained by a unique confluence. It requires a rigorous examination of culturally ingrained patriarchal norms, intersecting with deep theological distortions regarding marital authority. The empirical data shatters the illusion of ecclesiastical immunity. Ignoring these numbers means pastoral ignorance effectively functions as active complicity in a continent-wide epidemic. Intimate partner violence does not occur in a vacuum. It is the systemic enforcement of patriarchal power imbalances institutionalized at the micro level of the family unit. Sociologists studying Asian diaspora and immigrant communities have identified a phenomenon called swapping gender traditionalism, where religious identity and local culture merge. Indigenous patriarchal systems, like Confucian principles of female subordination, seamlessly fuse with conservative Christian interpretations of gender roles. The outcome is a doubly reinforced patriarchal structure. Abusive behaviors are frequently overlooked or rationalized as an acceptable enforcement of family hierarchy. Specific cultural mechanisms exacerbate this vulnerability. The systems of arranged marriages and the payment of bride wealth place immense pressure on women to conform, stripping them of individual autonomy. This transactional framework directly commodifies women. Ethnographic research shows that when an abuser views his wife as an acquired asset rather than an equal partner, physical violence becomes a culturally sanctioned method for managing his property. Compounding the physical threat is the pervasive cultural paradigm of honor and shame. Collectivist identity prioritizes the preservation of family honor, often termed face. Abusers exploit this anxiety, using the threat of communal disgrace to prevent victims from disclosing the violence to external authorities. When the preservation of a family's reputation supersedes a woman's individual safety, suffering in silence is elevated to a cultural and spiritual virtue. The victim is trapped by the exact community that should protect her. Sociocultural factors lay the groundwork, but theological validation fortifies it. The systemic silence of the Church regarding domestic abuse is widely referred to by scholars as the holy hush. At the core of this theological crisis is the interpretive distortion of the Pauline household codes. Across many global Christian contexts, Ephesians chapter 5 is deployed as an absolute, unilateral command for wifely submission. The mechanical error occurs when ecclesiastical leadership extracts the injunction for wives to submit in verse 22 entirely out of its grammatical context, ignoring the foundational requisite of mutual submission established in verse 21. This isolated reading mutates the concept of male headship. It transforms a descriptive role into a divine mandate for arbitrary, coercive control over a partner. This is frequently paired with a second major distortion, a toxic theology of suffering that perverts the nature of Christology itself. Victims in violent marriages are routinely counseled to follow the example of Christ, remaining silent during his affliction. They are taught that their passive endurance of physical battery constitutes a holy cross they must bear, effectively portraying God as demanding the traumatization of women for his glory. By baptizing patriarchal cultural norms with selective proof texting, the resulting ideological framework weaponizes a victim's faith against her. It creates a paralyzing cognitive dissonance where seeking safety feels like spiritual rebellion against God. Dismantling this scaffolding does not require the abandonment of Scripture. It demands a rigorous return to orthodox, liberating exegesis. The foundation of Christian marital ethics must begin in the creation narratives. Genesis 1:27 unequivocally declares that both male and female are created in the imago Dei, the image of God. Because both partners possess absolute ontological equality, any system that commodifies, intimidates, or batters a spouse is a literal desecration of the divine image residing within her. A non-abusive reading of the Pauline household codes requires placing them back into their immediate grammatical context. In the Greek, the word for submission, hupotasso, does not imply systemic subjugation or blind obedience. In the context of Christian mutual submission, it describes a voluntary yielding of self-interest for the sake of the other. Furthermore, the text redefines kephale, or headship. In the Greco-Roman context, Paul subverted absolute male authority by defining headship not as domination, but exclusively as extreme, self-sacrificial love, mirroring Christ's sacrifice. The biblical parameters are clear. A husband who utilizes physical violence or coercive control categorically and unilaterally forfeits any biblical claim to headship. Domestic violence is not a marital dysfunction. It is a fundamental assault on the character of God that definitively breaches the covenant of marriage. Correct theology must operationalize through highly practical, trauma-informed pastoral care. The non-negotiable primary directive for any spiritual leader is the immediate physical and psychological safety of the victim and her children. This must always take precedence over the preservation of the legal institution of marriage. A critical error frequently made by well-meaning but untrained clergy is the immediate recommendation of marital mediation or joint couple communication issue. Engaging in joint therapy when active abuse is present is highly dangerous because abusers routinely manipulate the therapeutic environment. Honest disclosures made by the victim during joint sessions frequently result in severe retaliatory violence once the couple returns home. Pastors must categorically refuse to mediate domestic violence. Instead, faith communities must implement a bifurcated pastoral response protocol. The traditional path of treating the couple as a single unit is completely rejected. The intervention splits into two paths: immediate safe harbor for the victim and externally monitored intervention programs for the abuser. Prioritizing the theological ideal of an intact family over the literal life of a human being is a profound failure of pastoral care and a direct violation of Christian ethics. Individual crisis response is necessary, but the ecclesiastical institution requires macro-structural reform to protect the vulnerable. The pervasive, holy hush must be broken from the pulpit. Pastors have a mandate to explicitly name intimate partner violence as both a grave sin and a criminal act in their public liturgy. Public denunciation from spiritual leadership directly dismantles the cultural honor and shame dynamic. It removes the stigma of disclosure and loudly signals to victims that the church is a safe harbor. Preventative intervention is equally critical. Churches must establish robust premarital counseling curricula that actively deconstruct toxic cultural power dynamics and expectations of male dominance before the marital covenant is even formed. Finally, churches must build coordinated community responses. Faith communities cannot operate in isolated silos. They must bridge the gap between spiritual support and secular professionals, partnering with local domestic violence agencies, psychological professionals, and law enforcement. By abandoning assumption-based care and reclaiming the equal dignity of the imago Dei, the Asian church can fulfill its true mandate. It can transition from a site of cultural complicity into a genuine sanctuary of healing, justice, and restorative grace.